Hello everyone, I really hope you're having a good day. Today, we're basically going to be drawing one of my main characters in my manga. Her name is Akisa. She's basically just a regular human girl. There's nothing too out of the ordinary about her. I'm just using a regular mechanical pencil you can pretty much find in just about any store. And even though I bring out a bunch more tools, like an eraser pencil, I don't end up using those, or the mono eraser either. It's just me using just a regular mechanical pencil and showing that even with regular tools, you still can get really good results. And so I often find I like to use just these regular tools whenever I'm drawing, just to get myself used to it. And used to working around some of the difficulties that can arise from using materials that might not be so high quality. And obviously you can still get good results with them. So for this pose to start with this character, I've already done some other ones, and I plan on kind of devoting a page in one of my sketchbooks to each character to kind of get more used to drawing them. But for this pose, her face is kind of in a downward angle, and that allows me to kind of play with how her hair would kind of react to being at a downward angle. And actually, some of these poses are mostly me trying to just imagine how her hair would react. Of course, I also try to use different expressions on her face and kind of play around with that too, but I find that for this, I was mostly concerned with her hair. Especially since her hair definitely is more unique than a lot of my other characters, so to kind of just play around with it a bit more. Also, I do feel that I need to practice a bit more with how hair reacts in different situations anyways, so I decided it was a good moment to try and practice this right now. So I'm basically kind of working on my guidelines. I placed some ovals kind of to guide me through the direction of like her hips and torso. And I'm kind of just relaxing while I'm doing this. This was really just for fun, again, so that I can just get used to drawing out her. It's been a while since I've drawn her. And I definitely want to do these with other characters. Actually, while I'm kind of working on more of the guidelines and just kind of setting up this overall pose, I can talk about like the one where she's over to the right, where you can kind of see her and she's striking a cool pose. That's also kind of me just playing with poses, trying to come up with some more dynamic poses that these characters are doing. Because when it comes to dynamic poses, it can sometimes be a bit difficult to get it right and make sure that it doesn't look stiff. I was kind of playing with the way her legs are kind of moving, and her arm and her hands, and even her expression. She's kind of winking and her hair's kind of just a little bit flowing upwards since she's moving. And then of course there's a rock there because she's gonna trip on it, because that's just hilarious. But anyways, for this pose I'm currently working on, it's not really too dynamic or anything like that. I'm just trying to play with her hair a bit, and I'm just kind of slowly moving, even with the mechanical pencil. Like, the eraser, it's not really the best. It kind of messes with the paper's texture. It makes it a bit more grainier feeling, and it leaves a lot more of the eraser shavings as well. But I still try to work around that. And I'm just trying to slowly move and make sure that I've got everything where I want it to be. And I also use a cool little tool that I've received in order to kind of get away all the eraser shavings without smudging it with my hand. I find that can definitely be a problem. The paper will smudge. It doesn't happen a lot for me, but it does happen often. So I'm just erasing the guidelines of the face so that I can draw her eyes in. Alright, where was I? Sorry, I got a bit distracted there. Anyways, I'm kind of drawing her eyes in. Her eyes are normally big and really expressive. But it's kind of when they narrow down that you can kind of really get some more emotion out of it. So her head's kind of downward, and I wasn't really thinking of any particular situation in which this would occur. I'm just going along with it just to show if an instance like this would happen, how would her hair react and whatnot, but her eyes are kind of looking up at something. It could be a person, it could honestly be anything, but her eyes are just looking up. And while her head's downward, her hair's kind of reacting to that by kind of being a lot lower, because it's lowering on her face and it's kind of covering up her eyes a bit more because her head's at a lower angle. Now this character has really big round eyes that are rounder than any of the other characters I normally draw, and her eyes are really interesting and really pretty, and I really definitely like to make sure that I emphasize that as much as possible, utilizing the shading that I can do, even if it's just with a regular mechanical pencil. And I'm going to be talking a bit more about this as we go on with the video. Pencil pressure is really important if you want to create a good gradient effect. It doesn't matter what tool you're using. It could be the cheapest tool and it could be the lowest quality tool, but as long as you understand good pencil pressure, especially on different kinds of paper, you can really create good shading effects that I especially like to use in my manga. And as you can even see a little bit from the eyes, you can see that it looks really, really cool. You can see it's dark on the top and way, way lighter on the bottom for her eyes, and you can almost imagine whatever colors you want her eyes are. Although I have done some artwork of her, and her hair is like purple, and her eyes are kind of like also purple, I believe anyways. Sometimes I forget these things. It's been a while since I've drawn after all, and I really did want to just practice it again. But anyways, I'm just trying to place in the eyebrows so that I'll have an easier time. Sometimes I end up making a mistake in putting the hair first and then the eyebrows, and that can make it a bit more difficult when it comes to expression or whatever she's kind of feeling at the moment. So I definitely make sure to put that in. And her hair's a lot low, which means it's kind of covering more of her face than it normally would. And since her head's kind of lowered a lot more, you see her eyes are bigger, while her mouth's smaller, and her nose even a bit smaller, just because you're seeing more of the upper portion of her face, if that makes sense. Whenever a character is leaning or they're really close to the panel in a frame of manga, it's really important to make the body parts that are more closer to, well, just imagine there's a camera for each panel. Whenever a character is coming closer, they're obviously going to get bigger, and whatever part of their body is closer to the camera is going to get really big. So you always have to keep that in mind, like the perspective and where the character is. So when she's leaning her head, you're not going to be seeing a lot of like the bottom of her face, because the upper portion of her face is showing more because her head's leaned, if that makes sense. I really hope I explained that. Good. Now I just quickly turn the sketchbook so I can sketch the top of her head. I often find it's okay to turn the page and like turn it whatever way you need to in order to get the most curvy lines that you can. Because not at every angle can your hand just easily do curvy lines in order to do the top of the head of a character. So sometimes it's good to just turn it whenever you need to. I I really do like working with mechanical pencils because you can get that fine line detail and you can really just go in, get as much detail as you want. And I just zoom out just to show the sketches that I make in my sketchbooks are often really small. I don't often go for a really big sketch of any characters. I just like to go really small. It kind of saves up on space and allows me to put in more different sketches and different practices of the characters. Also, I just remembered for this one, I didn't draw on her glasses, and that's important because she has glasses that she normally wears, but I also have to keep in mind what would she look like without them, so I try to do poses where she doesn't have them. And I'm just working more on her hair and just showing how it's going down more because she's leaning, and you know, gravity's just taking its role in play when it comes to the hair. I'm just putting a bit more detail, but I'm also, again, just trying not to put too much detail there. In any places where I feel it's necessary, I'll just add more pressure and make those areas darker so they're more noticeable. Which again is another example of pencil pressure. But this mechanical pencil wasn't that bad at all, I will say. Like, I can imagine myself just using this to make my manga, because the quality of this wasn't actually that bad. The eraser had some trouble because the shavings were just getting everywhere, and that normally doesn't happen whenever I'm using my other pencils. But even with that, I still managed to work with it, and we managed to get in some pretty good results. I'm just working on her clothes. The clothing really doesn't matter too much, although I do intend to do more of a practice with different types of clothing and the different materials, how the different materials react, super tight clothing versus super loose clothing, and the different kinds of wrinkles. Normally I don't focus too much on that because I don't pay attention to it as much and I don't prioritize it as much, but I do want to do more of a practice and almost like a study of it. Especially how it reacts when a character is moving or even when they're not moving. Maybe when they're leaning, maybe when they're underwater as well. All those different kinds of scenarios that allow me to get more information, allow me to use that knowledge for future moments and panels in my manga. And I often find I like to try and test myself a little bit with things I'm not so familiar with. So, if I don't know, like for example, one of my more recent, actually short videos, I was dealing with mushrooms, and I honestly didn't really know too much about them, other than just the common ones. I know you can eat them, but I didn't really know that there were so many different varieties. But when I was doing that short, and I was kind of going for the mushroom theme, seeing those different kinds of mushrooms, and seeing how they look and how they're so different from each other and how there's so many different appearances they can take on, it just gave me a whole new perspective when it comes to mushrooms, and I wouldn't have thought that way before. And it wasn't difficult, but it took me a bit to understand the texture and being able to replicate that through my drawings. Getting a good mushroom texture was so interesting and weird to try and get that so it can actually look like a mushroom. But in the end, I'm actually pretty satisfied with what I got down. It was a really interesting experience. I did not know mushrooms could look so many different ways until I did that short, and boy, I learned a lot. Alright, where was I? Oh yeah, so we just continued to draw some more of her clothing, gave her a little skirt and shirt, nothing too interesting about that. just, basic clothing. I was really trying to just mess around with hairstyles and whatnot. That was just my main focus of it. And this is just meant to be just, relaxing. You can listen in on this while you're maybe drawing. This isn't supposed to be super duper hardcore. How many drawings can I do in just under an hour or 40 minutes? It's just supposed to be relaxing, and you can get more of an idea of sort of my thinking process whenever I'm drawing. So yeah, this is basically the end of this sketch, and soon I'm going to be starting with the next one. But yeah, even her expression, I'm trying to really capitalize on how much detail and how much I can show through her expression. And I did go through that a lot more when it comes to that other video I did, the other behind the scenes video, where I was really focusing on expressions, even though it was more in a chibi-ish kind of way. Alright, and you can just get a look at some of the other sketches that I did before. Soon enough, this whole page is just going to be filled with so many more poses of this character, just like I intend to do with the others. Alright, so if I remember correctly, for this pose, I was also mostly going on the angle of her face. It's way more upwards. She's looking up at something, and also her expression's kind of going to give away a good idea of what that something might be. So since her face is more upwards, I use the guidelines to show just about where I place her eyes. My guidelines are perfect, but they get the job done. And I'm just trying to, again, darken the lines that are important to me, and sort of just erase the lines that I won't need. And there were so many eraser shavings on the page due to the mechanical pencil's eraser that wasn't so good, but just was working through it and still trying to get as much quality as I would have with my other pencil that I would with this one. I don't do a full body of this. It mostly just goes up to her shoulders, and right now I'm mostly just focusing on the eyes, the placement of them. Now this is almost an opposite of the last one I just did, because her face is pointing upwards, which means we're going to be seeing less of the eyes, even though her eyes are big, so you're probably not really going to notice too much of a difference, possibly. But that's just because her eyes are big. But anyways, you're going to be noticing her eyes are smaller than her mouth. Her mouth's going to be a bit bigger. And her nose is going to be higher on her face because her face is a lot more upwards. Camera angle as well, I also need to work on, which goes along with the perspective. But maybe we'll get to talking about that a bit later in the future. Really just taking my time with it. I find when you have a lot of characters, then it's easier to forget how to draw a lot of them. So you need to remember how to draw them properly, or they're gonna look not like how they normally would. And if you ever see my original chapter, these characters look a lot more different than how they currently do. And also for this one, I didn't shade in her eyes to really show that she's surprised and shocked about something. I often see it's a technique used a lot in manga or anime, where when a character is surprised, suddenly their eyes kind of go from being shaded and detailed to kind of being more on the palish side. Like there's not as much color there to kind of signify that they're shocked about something, or yeah, basically just shocked. I don't think I've ever seen any other moments when their eyes get like that. But I like to use that because it just looks really cool to me. And I'm kind of going for almost a trembling mouth look. And I will be adding in her glasses. But I really do appreciate the moments when she doesn't have her glasses on. She looks just really, really cool. Now her hair is going to be way higher up on her face. And her hair is kind of going to be resting along the side of her head and just kind of going down, like almost completely straight. Again, I could probably go more into detail with this, but just trying to get used to talking a bit more. I'm not too used to giving details and information about what I normally think about, so I'm just trying to get used to just speaking, and I promise it'll most likely get better. So yeah, she has much more shorter hair in the back because her hair's kind of in like a side ponytail, so a lot of her hair is just being grabbed and pulled to the side. So that's why her hair is a lot shorter in the back, because a lot of it's just being pulled. But she actually has really long hair. And as you can see, I'm just putting in her glasses and also making them higher up, making sure they cover at least half of her eyes, because that's just the way I draw glasses. And I made sure to put sweat as well. I also made sure to darken her face a bit. And this is also where you can really get the sense of pencil pressure on the paper. I'm just trying to shade her face, not to make it too dark, but to kind of show that there's a shadow going over her, which shows that something's kind of wrong. And I just ever so lightly just kind of shade there, not too much. I always keep in mind that if I want a face to be darker, I just have to just ever so slightly make the amount of pressure I'm putting on the paper harder. And the paper that I'm even drawing on, it's not super duper high quality. You can almost imagine it as just regular printer paper, almost, that kind of texture. And depending on the texture of your paper, you might have to change things up a bit. Some paper is more absorbent. Sorry, I cannot speak today. Some paper is more absorbent, some less. It really honestly just depends. But for this one, because this one's more thin and almost fragile, I have to be careful about the amount of pressure that I'm placing on it, or else then it could potentially just tear on me. Especially with the eraser, whenever you're erasing and you can just feel that texture kind of almost breaking away of the paper, then you kind of got to be a bit worried, because if you erase it any harder, you could risk tearing through the paper. But I'm kind of used to working with lower quality pencils anyways, so I know how to put a lighter amount of pressure on it. Now I'm just kind of placing her hair, and because she's leaning back, that ponytail of hers, that side ponytail, it's going behind her head, because her head's at such an angle where it's going backwards. And you can't see as much of it as you normally would, and I kind of zoom in so you can kind of see it a bit better. I like to make my sketches a lot smaller than other artists might, so I might have to zoom in on some of them for you to be able to see even more detail if I did place any more. But for this one right now, I'm kind of just practicing dynamic poses. So this one is just her running. I don't end up finishing it. I'm just kind of practicing. Sometimes I just place guidelines in the pose and just leave those guidelines there so I can just see what works, what doesn't, what I should improve on, and I don't add too much more detail after I do that. Her head's kind of again tilted a bit more downwards, not as downwards as the first one that I did in this video, but it's still placed downwards, and she's kind of running, and you're going to see me put in some ovalish shapes that I like to put in. But first I work with the shoulders. Her shoulders are a bit more up, showing she's maybe a bit more tense, more nervous. And as you can see, I put in an oval, and I like to curve it just to show where exactly her body's kind of going to be moving towards. And I like to use it so I can place her hip there and just show like the curve of it. And it's almost like I'm kind of going for a stick figure-ish look, but I'm just kind of placing her legs there, showing how they bend and whatnot. And I'm just curving her body. I'm kind of showing where her legs would be going as well. And of course, with a bunch of different characters, it's always important to remember sort of the body type that each one has. Some characters may be a bit thicker than others, some a bit skinnier, and all that can be very important because, well, I just prefer to just pay attention to that. You don't have to do that if you ever don't want to. It's not something that's necessary, but just keeping consistent with the body type of characters can really help you differentiate one character from another. Especially maybe if you have two characters that look very similar to each other. You can show that main difference by having one with a slightly heavier build, maybe a slightly stronger one than the other. I'm just rambling on, honestly. And I'm just kind of showing where her arms would be. Now, I was just pausing and thinking just about where exactly it would be. And I'm sort of thinking that as she's running, you can already tell like her lead arm, if you can kind of see it, it's already going forward opposite with her left foot. So the other arm would be going backwards. There's so many different ways to run too, so I definitely want to study a lot more of that. And the different ways of running can show what kind of character you have. So I definitely want to do a bit more research about that, especially the angles when it comes to running. Showing just a character just running, maybe jogging, and then showing a character who's just full on coming after somebody. For this one, I thought that the right leg that I did was a bit extreme, but I just kept it there. Don't know if it would make that much sense in real life, but nah, it's manga, you can just do whatever you want. There are no rules except the ones you make for yourself. And that arm is sticking out a bit, even though it's kind of going behind a bit. So I do make sure to show some more of her arm. And don't pay attention to what I'm doing over there. Just don't pay attention to it. There's nothing to see there. It's just a shadow. It's nothing important. Just look at the one on the left, okay? Just pay attention to that. There's literally nothing for you to be looking at. I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm just having fun with the sketch there. Just ignore that. I know that I'm kind of doing something there, but just ignore that. There's nothing to be paying attention to. Like, seriously. There are absolutely no spoilers in this video, guaranteed. Okay then, I'm just adding a shirt. Yeah, that's what I was doing. I was just adding a shirt. It'd be a bit awkward if there wasn't one. Yeah. Anyways, going back to the main thing that I was supposed to be working on, I don't end up finishing this. So this is mostly gonna look more sketchy, which is completely fine anyways. So you can just see kind of how I'm working through it and whatnot. Just erasing a bit more. I believe I might get the eyes in, but I might not. But you can really see how the pose is all coming together. And you can get a good sense of how I draw, just by looking at sort of the guidelines. And I'm so used to these guidelines that, you know, it's all almost second nature. I just automatically put it. Muscle memory, I believe, is the term that you'd probably use. So yeah, I am putting the eyes, but this doesn't get finished. And there are so many eraser shavings on the paper, so I'm just trying to erase a lot of that away. But so far it looks really high quality. But actually, I go from that, and I actually just wanted to show you guys how I draw in her eyes. I try to make them big so you can really just see how they look. And before I was talking about pencil pressure, and I'm going right back to it in order to address it right here while using just a random regular mechanical pencil that you can get anywhere. It's nothing high quality or anything. So I'm making her eyelashes darker, which I'll be shading in. Now if you notice with the eyelids, they're a lot darker than the bottom part of the eye, which I do not know what you call that. So I'm making it darker. I'm making her eyelashes thicker in the areas that I want them to be. But you have to be very, very, I don't know what word I'd use, but you have to just make sure you're paying attention to where you put the thickness. And you have to be very, very careful with it because it's so skinny that if you mess up even a little bit, it'll look a bit wonky. And I'm just putting her nose there just to make it look a bit more normal, I guess. But her eyes are really, really big, really circular, very anime, I guess you could say, or manga. She has very, very beautiful, pretty eyes. I will say that, though. Out of other characters that I've drawn, I do enjoy drawing her eyes a lot. And so her eyes are normally really, really big, which means if they ever get any smaller, you should kind of be concerned a bit. Unless it's just a perspective thing, I guess. But yeah, with her pupils, I put 2 lines there, and I shade it in. Which is interesting because when I actually color her in with color, and I'm not just drawing her in like this, she actually doesn't have those pupils there. It's so weird. I just naturally don't put them there. Anyways, I digress from that. I'm starting off to shade lighter. But then, as you can see, I'm putting more pressure on the paper, making it darker on the top. But I'm not done there. I make it even darker at the very top of the eye, the pupils, the eyes. And I'm just trying to create a gradient there by making them blend with each other. Kind of putting in a middle ground between the light and the dark. And as you can see, it gives this really, really nice effect. And I'm just putting the eyelid folds. I believe that might be what you call them. Surely this is the best commentary you've ever heard, surely. But anyways, putting in her eyebrows. But if you just look, you can just see the gradient that's there. And it looks really, really good. And all of this from just a regular pencil. You really don't need much. You don't need the highest quality of stuff. That's something I definitely have learned. And I put in her glasses, so you can only really enjoy those eyes without glasses for just a moment. The glasses must go back on, though. So yeah, I'm just adding in those glasses, and I'm making them a bit darker so that you could definitely tell they're glasses. and I'm sort of just erasing, and I just want to make it clear, with all these lines that I'm putting on this piece of paper in the sketchbook, I'm really not putting too hard lines. I'm just ever so slightly applying harder pressure in the areas where I want things to be darker, but I'm not putting too much pressure there either. And so now you can see a lot more of the sketches that are there. I'm not really sure how much more I get in on this other sketch that I've got going that I'm currently working on. I get in the eyes, but I feel like that's just the only thing I get in. In this one, she's a bit more determined, is probably the word that I would use. She's not angry, she's determined about something. But what? Who knows? It could be about anything. It's kind of hilarious. The one that I did on the left almost looks like she's looking at herself running, and she's kind of like, what are you doing? So yeah, she's a bit more determined, but I didn't have enough time to really show that. Apologies for that, everyone, but maybe we'll continue working on this, or maybe I'll just finish this on my own time. I draw a lot more on my own time than I do in the videos, though. Drawing with camera, you have to make sure that your hand's not covering up everything, which can be very difficult. So just like I did a lot more before, as you saw in the video, like those other sketches that weren't in the video that you saw, I'll probably be doing some more. So next time we come back to this character, if you guys really do like this, you're probably going to see a lot more that aren't going to be in the video. Sorry, but I will be doing a lot. Especially the other characters too. Can't leave them behind. So I do manage to get in the mouth. So I guess I do manage to get in some kind of expression. So yeah, just working on that one a bit more. I don't finish it, but... Oh, I actually do manage to get in the hair. I'm actually surprised. I don't think I get in that much of it, though. This is actually shocking me a lot. I didn't think I thought I drew slower than this. Not bad. I guess I'm a bit faster than I thought. Time is just so weird when you're drawing. You don't even notice it flies by. You just get so into the drawing. You're just living the drawing sometimes. It's like, is this her running? Or me? Sometimes when I'm drawing, I don't know. I'm just in the moment. I feel as though this is I'm so sorry. The way I'm speaking right now, I cannot speak. But hey, at least you're seeing, you know, the behind the scenes of me talking. This isn't even scripted or anything. I'm just giving my thoughts. I guess you can call this a real behind the scenes then. But anyways, I'm surprised I managed to get in her hair anyways, but okay, not bad. I can be completely forgetful sometimes. I completely forgot that I even did this part. I guess I get in her headband, not headband. I'm forgetting so many words. But anyways, this is also me experimenting with her hair flying because she's running. It makes sense, right? She's running, not at top speed, but she's certainly running. She's determined to get to something. Who knows what that something could be, right? I mean, for all we know, she could be running away from something, but... I put in the glasses, which... I don't remember this. Is this some kind of Mandela effect? What's going on? Don't pay attention to that. This seems like it's pretty much it. We got a lot of good expressions. This was me doing it quickly too. I'll normally spend hours upon hours of just drawing away, especially when it comes to like characters. So with these videos behind the scenes, these are really way shorter to me than they might appear. Like, I would be spending way more time in this, but for time's sake, not right now. But anyways, right here you can see a lot of the other ones that I've done. You can see her eyes, her expressions there, her dynamic poses. Hopefully they're dynamic anyways. I try my best. Her without her glasses. It's all great stuff. And you're most likely going to see more of this. So, here we are. Right now, the quick version, where we can talk about pretty much anything when it comes to drawing. Now, I was going on a bit more about pencil pressure. And with pencil pressure comes line variation. And with line variation comes pretty interesting drawings. So, you've got drawings with line variation, where you often see some lines are thicker than others. Maybe if you've ever watched an anime and you pay attention to the lines in the characters, you can see that some areas are way thicker than others, while some areas are thinner. And then you've also got drawings where there's no line variation. All the lines are pretty much the same width. Every line pretty much has the same thickness. There's no areas where it gets thinner or not. And depending on how you use both, you can come up with some pretty good renders for art and drawings and whatnot. For some of my drawings, especially digital ones, I do a little bit of line variation. Some lines are thinner than others in areas where there might be more detail, so that I can fit in more detail, because thicker lines will not allow you to get in much detail if it's super small. In one of my latest shorts, that mushroom one, which was very interesting, definitely really cool. But anyways, in that one, for some of the smaller details, I use thinner lines. But really with that, if you have a drawing tablet or anything, you really can just instantly get that good line variation going if that's what you're looking for. Because with those tablets, those drawing tablets, the harder you press the pen down, the thicker the line, and the lighter the thinner. With line variation, you can get really cool effects because the areas where it's darker or thicker, there could be, man, I'm just at loss of words today. I don't know, you get what I mean, right? Right, yeah, let's just move on. Anyways, where was I? Yeah, line variation, okay. Line variation, maybe the thicker the areas are the areas where you're showing more detail, sure. And the thinner areas are where you care less about whatever you're drawing. So in the thinner areas, you're kind of just telling whoever's viewing your picture, it's an important part, I guess. But the thicker areas are like, yeah, look at this. Maybe it's a thick outline around a character or a chibi character. That certainly gets the person's attention so that they're looking at that detail with lines thicker. But with mechanical pencils, what I like about them is there really is a lot less line variation. You can certainly make line variation, and you can do that by going over the different parts of your characters more than one time to get them thicker than other parts. But with mechanical pencils, they're that one size. You can get specific sizes. I believe this is a 0.7. I could be wrong though. I believe I might normally be using 0.7 or 0.5. I don't know, maybe I'll check later, but I won't be saying that in this video. That's just, no, I'm not going to be doing that. This video is already long enough as it is. I don't need to make it longer. But with mechanical pencils like this, you can really just trust that you'll pretty much get the same thickness of line pretty much every time, which makes them so great. Because you can get various sizes, which means you can go more and more into detail in places that you want to put more detail. So I can make these small drawings, and sometimes these small sketches of mine or drawings of mine have lots of detail, and so by getting more of a smaller, thinner mechanical pencil, I can really go in and put in whatever detail I need to put in. It's pretty much as simple as that. But if you're ever using just regular pencils, like a regular number 2 pencil, because of the lead isn't really an exact size, some of the areas are more down than others, if that makes sense, because you're using it. Whenever you're drawing, you're obviously using away the lead, so then it becomes smoother in those areas than others. So you really do get a lot more line variation, and there's no guaranteed width of your lines whenever you're drawing with a number 2 pencil or pencils that are like a number 2 pencil. So you can get more line variation there because there's really no way to just force the line variation to come out of that unless you're sharpening it. But with mechanical pencils, that guaranteed width of your lines is already pretty much set there, and it even tells you the size, which is pretty cool. You can even get lead that's that specific size of whatever you want it to be. Where was I going with this again? It's your fault. You made me forget. Okay, anyways. Where was I? Oh yeah, pencil pressure. Right. Sorry, I forget things very easily. I just drift off sometimes, but it's all cool. This is behind the scenes. You're pretty much getting behind the scenes of how I work. So that's cool and all. Anyways, pencil pressure. So, obviously, line variation goes along with pencil pressure because when you're working traditionally anyways, in order to get the thicker lines, you need to put more of a pressure on the paper. Now, like I believe I said before, it all depends on the kind of paper you're using. Different papers react differently. No two differently sized papers or different company papers work exactly the same. And even the same sheets of paper from the same company might be just slightly different. You never know. Paper can be weird sometimes. Let's say it's a very moist day. That paper is going to be very moist, and your smudging, the rate of smudging your hand might do, if you don't have like a glove on or anything, which I don't have that, it might increase significantly. If it's a very windy day, your paper might feel more dry. Yeah, just test it out, okay? So it really depends. But for the pressure you put, I'm really starting to forget what I'm saying. You know what? Let's just go on with it, okay? Anyways, so you really want to know what paper you're using so that you can have more information about what pressure you should use. Too much pressure, your paper will tear apart, and it won't be good for you, especially with erasers. Erasers are very important with pressure as well. If you have a horrible eraser that literally just smears everything, you want to put less pressure on that, especially if it's the only thing you have to use. But with your pencil, oh, the sharpness too. There's so much more. When you really think about it, there's so many other just little components that really work together with the pressure. I'm thinking about hardness. If you're working with graphite pencils especially, there's different hardnesses of each pencil, okay? So some pencils just naturally are softer than others. So the lines they do aren't as hard, and some pencils are just super duper hard, meaning the amount of pressure you should be putting on them really should not be that much. It can really tear through the paper, especially if your paper is weak like the one I'm using. Very, very fragile and light. You really shouldn't put too much pressure on it. Already the pressure I was putting enough. If I just turn the page, I can kind of see what I'm drawing on the other side. So I just have to be very, very careful with that. And that's just what happens with cheap sketchbooks. But anyways, anyways, you want to be aware of the pressure. You want to know how to get good gradient effects. You're going to need to know about how much pressure you should be putting on your paper, how much pressure you should be putting on your hand. Don't put too much pressure on your hand, because then you could possibly hurt your hand and make it ache, and you don't really want that. You want your hand to be relaxed so you can continue drawing as much as possible. But anyways, in order to get good gradient effects, you should sketch as lightly as possible to just test out the paper. And that's what you should honestly do if you ever get new different company papers. Try and test it out, see what you can do, see what you can't do. Markers on paper and color pencils on paper are another story, which I could talk about maybe in future videos, because I actually do want to color in one of my characters with some color pencils sometime. I think it'd be really, really fun. Color pencils and markers are a different story, and even fine liners and inking pens are another story, but right now we're just talking about pencil pressure. So we're talking about pencils right now. This is the pencil's time to shine. So, you want a good gradient? You go from light to dark. You gotta try and find a middle ground. You want darker? You go harder. You want lighter? You go lighter. It's pretty self-explanatory. So, but it really also depends on how much pressure you prefer. Some artists might like darker colors or darker gradients, especially if you're working with maybe manga or whatnot. I mean, the way I do my manga is kind of different from others, because normally they just use inks or they do digitally, and I just actually use like pencils in order to shade and stuff, which is pretty cool, but you know, whatever about it. But, I'm just gonna go from that and just talk about the two pencils and how much pressure you should put on them. We've got the mechanical pencils on one side, and we've got the regular pencils, number 2 pencils you can just think about, but there's others too. Those pencils and like graphite pencils and whatnot, there's so many, you could just check it out. They're really, really cool. So, we've got those two. Mechanical pencils, when it comes to pressure, you really got good pressure with that though. Like, you can do good gradients. You really don't need to put too much pressure on a mechanical pencil. They're often on the much harder side when it comes to pencils. I don't really know any soft mechanical pencils, so just be aware of that. And really honestly, you could just test it out yourself. Like, you can just get a pencil, the nearest pencil that's nearby you, and you could just test it on a sheet of paper. It could be Post-it note, notebook, and you can really just get a feel for that. And just work with it lighter. Work with shading it so light you can barely see it, and then keep on applying more and more pressure until you get where you're literally trying to tear through the paper, and then you can just get that instant gradient effect that can be seen, that you can just put all together. And so we've got the other side that we're now looking at with regular pencils. Now there's graphite pencils, charcoal pencils. I don't really know too much about that one, but I know that there's graphite pencils. And with those ones really do come in different hardnesses and softnesses, as I was saying before. Again, with the quick version, I have to end up repeating myself, because I'm just thinking through so many different things, and there's so limited time with how much to say and how much not to say, but I'm just kind of trying to think about it. So, anyways, with those, you really have to be careful with those, because you never know. Those ones can have different hardnesses and softnesses. Those ones can be tricky to figure out. You can only really figure them out, honestly, through just testing them out yourself. Some pencils are harder than others. They're not the same. Mechanical pencils, you have less of a problem with that, because you're pretty much guaranteed the same kind of result all the time with them. That's why a lot of people like to use them. They're very exact with their lines and their line art. But for regular pencils, that's not exactly guaranteed, because you might have one thickness at, like, let's say you first buy a pencil and it's already sharpened and you draw with it. You'll get those nice thin lines. Draw with it for an hour, 2 hours even, the next day, and you're going to start to see your lines are getting thicker. Because as your pencil's getting shorter from using it, those lines might just end up getting thicker unless you sharpen it again. So already we have different line variation with that, but also depending on how hard or soft it is how hard you're going to be starting with it, like how hard the gradient might be, and or basically I'm saying how dark the gradient might be. If you have a much harder pencil, actually I believe I might be getting this confused, but I believe if you have a harder pencil, you might have lighter lines, but if you have a much softer pencil, you'll be getting harder lines more easily. And when I say hard, just replace that with dark, because I just use them interchangeably. When I think hard, I think dark. I'm just used to thinking like that. But when it comes to that, what I'm basically trying to say at the end of the day is monitor the pencil you're using and just observe how it reacts to papers of different kinds, and through that you can be able to make your own gradients by shading lighter and shading darker and combining the two to make a nice, beautiful blend for your character's hair and your face. Which makes me think that there's different ways to shade different things. If you've got a metallic object, the way it shines and reflects whatever's near it and whatever's around it, it's going to be completely different from, let's say, how a plastic item might just, reflect things and whatnot. Objects can be weird, but as you can see, the points when I'm stopping talking, it's really because there's just so much more to think about. When I go into one topic, it just leads right into another because there's so many different things that come to drawing. And a lot of times you only see all of it as a whole, but when you just break it down, you just see how many more different tiny smaller subgroups there are, and how many subgroups are in those subgroups. But yeah, so if you even just look, you can see the different ways that I'm using pencil pressure. Obviously the eyes are the most biggest thing you can see in this, but I also do intend to just shade in a whole character, a full body of some character, be it monster or human, because I've got both. And I'll just shade it, and whatever clothing material it's wearing, I'll be able to show the material through my shading of it, and I'll be able to talk to you guys more about that, and even more about the pressure you're putting on your paper and applying on it. And I've got multiple different sketchbooks, so each sketchbook kind of has different paper textures. Some are a lot softer than others, some harder, some thicker. I do have a lot thicker paper, some a lot thinner. This is one of my more thinner papered sketchbooks that I've got, but I just want to use this so I can just sketch some stuff basically for this channel specifically, so that you guys can kind of see things without ending up being spoiled, because there's got a lot of spoilers everywhere. That blue post-it note is covering up a big spoiler. I'm just gonna make it that very, very clear. That's the reason why it's there, but after this next chapter, maybe you guys will be able to see it. We'll see. But so far, I hope you enjoy my rambling. That's basically all I'm pretty much doing in all this. I'm just rambling on about little things that I think about. And some of what I've been saying might not make too much sense, but hopefully my commentary will improve as we continue to do these. And I'm slowly but surely just becoming more and more used to talking, just ever so slowly. So it'll be interesting comparing and contrasting this video from the last behind the scenes I did, where I was working with expressions. So yeah, and you can definitely check out more if you're interested. I've got videos not talking about it, but if you just look at some of the artwork I do, you can really slightly get a sense of what I'm going on about. And obviously, this talk about pencil pressure is going to be so fun when I'm working with colored pencils. Colored pencils are fun. There's a big difference between just shading and you're just basically using gray, and then shading when you're using a bunch of different colors all intermingling with each other to create these different beautiful gradients that are just found in clothing and eyes and other things as well. And me even doing that drawing of her eyes kind of almost makes me also want to do a video on different characters' eyes. I treat each character like they're the only character sometimes, or a majority of times. Meaning, when I draw them like they're the most important thing in the whole series, even if they're not. Which means I make them look completely different from everyone else a lot of times, and it ends up looking pretty interesting when you compare and contrast their eyes. But yeah, we're starting to approach pretty much the end. I believe we're pretty much at the end. Pretty much, I believe. But you can just look for a moment and you can pretty much see right there. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks for watching.